Talk shoes. Recorded live.
These are provisions, broadly and specifically with regards to infrastructure, that Republicans have traditionally supported broadly.
I suspect really big surges in the market for housing going forward is going to be the immigrant population.
But I don't, as a president, have the authority to go. If our national security is threatened, then you do it properly.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue.
This is how liberty dies. With thunderous applause.
Welcome to Liberty Cat Talk Live. This is your host, Todd Andrew Burnett, and his co-host, James Lambert Jr.
All right, well, welcome to the 60th show of Liberty Cat Talk Live. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to go ahead and start off with Todd. Are you with us tonight?
I certainly am.
Well, how was your week, man?
It was awesome, Jim. It was awesome, as usual, so... yeah. I did a interview with Gary Chartier and Charles W. Johnson on their book, Markets Not Capitalism. So I'm not sure if you heard it yet, but it's up for listening right now. But it's so far I've heard it's everybody loves it. So
excellent. Yeah, I've got it on my to-be played list. It'll go on my iPhone, and I'll listen to it in the car on the way to work.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Who do we have with us on the call right now?
Jason Gonella.
How you doing tonight, Jason?
I'm all right, although my town council is giving me a headache.
I think that's what they exist for, pretty much.
Pretty much. Unfortunately, as the president of the town council, I have to deal with it.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, we also have somebody from North Nevada. Who is this?
Well, if that's Pahrump, that's me, Neil Schulman.
Ah, Neil Schulman. J. Neil Schulman. Hey.
Glad you could make it, Neil.
Happy to be here.
All right. Who else do we have on the call tonight?
We also have Stephen Linnabary with us. Steve.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
All right. We got a full house tonight. Welcome, guys.
Awesome.
Thank you.
There's a couple topics that we have on the agenda to talk about tonight. We'll probably only hit 3 or 4 of them because we tend to go a little bit in depth. But figured we could go ahead and start with the U.S. Senate's agreement on a 2-month payroll tax cut extension. I'm going to go ahead and get the thoughts from the panel on what you think about that particular bill getting a tax cut, getting an extension. What about the future for being able to cut down a little bit more on the taxes that we're paying? What do you think is going to happen going forward with the possible change of hands at the White House? How that may play out with regards to future either tax hikes or tax cuts. How about we start with you, Stephen?
First of all, I don't think that there's going to be a change in the White House next year, so I don't think that's going to have any effect. And the payroll tax thing, I didn't see that on my list of things to discuss here, so I didn't follow that at all.
Well, I did send it out, so.
Yeah, that was a week or so, a few days ago, but it's not on the current list.
Well, basically, this is probably one of the most important tax cuts. Yeah, I forgot to put it on there. My bad. But yeah, this is a very big issue, the tax cut. So the payroll tax cut in the Senate, I'm not really surprised that they're going to be pulling this, this temporary tax cut for a month. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? A month? This is going to help us out. What, like somehow the economy is like a dead patient that you can just take a defibrillator and just revive it and just go clear, and all of a sudden the economy is stimulated. I mean, come on.
Oh wait, check it out, Todd. The Senate approved 2 months worth of tax cuts. Wow, I'm so impressed.
Regardless, it's too little, too late.
I'm very intrigued at how the only thing they put sunsets on in terms of legislation is tax cuts. If they were to have put sunsets into most things, I'd be much more impressed with Congress.
So,
yeah.
What about you, Neil?
Well, I suppose my first reaction is not all that different from what these other gentlemen are saying. It's rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Only one of the presidential candidates, Ron Paul, is providing anything other than business as usual. Ron Paul is about as popular among both Republicans and Democrats as Nelson Mandela was among the white South African government, about as popular among the establishment Republicans and Democrats as Gandhi was to the occupying British powers in India. As a consequence of that, if Ron Paul gets anywhere near the presidency, he will be stopped promptly simply by running a third-party candidate to drain enough Republican votes off, probably on the basis of his opposition to endless wars everywhere. There's always people in favor of war who can be, rallied behind third-party candidates. Might as well even call up the war party or something like that, and have them come out in full Indian headdresses, and that would put Barack Obama in for another 4 years.
Yeah, that seems like it's probably what's going to happen. We're going to have another 4 years of Obama. I'm wondering, though, what the panelists think about the possibility then of permanently extending the tax roll cut. So it's no longer an extension; it just becomes a long-term cut, maybe for the next 5 to 10 years. Because within 2 months it goes back up if they don't do something about it with the Senate bill, and with the House bill it's 1 month extension. I'm wondering if Obama will seize upon that to try to push something through to come out the other side looking like a hero rather than part of the tax and spend party. What do the panelists think about that? Todd?
Well, I seriously doubt it. I really seriously doubt it. I don't think that, Obama, remember, Obama is the key figure in this entire administration, our commander-in-chief, who basically doesn't like a tax cut at all. I mean, he's never disliked a tax increase. So this is the same one who would actually raise taxes, but even if he did cut, the payroll tax cut, what a lot of people don't realize is that he's going to extend the unemployment benefits, and that's going to play a very big role in not really boosting the economy. But then again, we're talking about the same president that just won't cut regulations, cut spending, but spending is the biggest problem, more so than just the taxes and the regulations at this point.
If I might, I think what the establishment does not understand is how unstable the situation is. They're acting as if they have a steady state in which they can continue to play the same sort of games they've played for the last century. They don't understand that they've reached a crisis point, and so they're playing the same political games and acting as if it's business as usual. It's not business as usual. As we see, if a country like Italy or Greece or Spain or Ireland can destabilize the entire continent of Europe, and as a consequence of that, destabilize the entire world economy, then there are uncountable tipping points which we haven't even considered yet. I mean, we talk about housing bubbles and various sorts of things, but we don't know what hidden landmines are waiting, and neither do they, and they can't make any rational economic calculations.
Right.
I think they realize that they are losing control, but they just don't have any way of both keeping control and keeping themselves in power.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I think I have to imagine that there's a full-blown panic going on. These guys just are so worried about what's going to happen, but they don't have clue the first on how to stop it. On top of course, ensuring that they're the ones who stay in power, because that's always the primary and utmost concern on the minds of anybody that's reached the level of a national office. But
you see, I mean, when I refer to this as a Titanic economy, there is a certain equity involved, which I think the establishment class don't understand. That literally, they are in the same boat as everybody else, and as a consequence of that, they are going to have to use the exact same methods as everybody else to try to save themselves. Whatever assets they have that they don't want, sucked into this endless black hole, they're going to have to. They're going to have to figure out ways of preserving in non-monetized assets, hard assets, consumable assets, the same things that Mormons are stocking away and survivalists are stocking away and permaculture off-grid types are stocking away. It's all the same strategy of getting out of the above-ground economy, and anybody who doesn't do that is going to be destroyed. And if I don't care how many billions on paper it is, if they don't put it into something hard, they will be destroyed along with everybody else. The Titanic is going down, and it doesn't matter whether you're in first class or steerage, it's going down. The 1% is in the exact same boat as the 99%, and that's something that Occupy doesn't understand.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up the Occupy movement, Neil, because that entire movement is actually unraveling at the seams on that end. I mean, yeah, there are certain interspersed areas of the movement where there are libertarians who are making a difference, but we're talking about the progressive side that largely make up the entire network, and they are basically falling apart. So, they're really puppets for the democratic interests on Wall Street and for Obama, and yet they don't even realize it.
Well, Occupy has always been a pop front. It's always been a number of different factions coming together into a popular front, and that means that as reality starts to set in, the coalition isn't going to hold together.
And I think the problem with Occupy is never really identified who the 1% is. Lou Rockwell had a good article about that where he identified the 1% as those who actually make and enforce law.
Well, the Occupy movement started out as a grassroots movement, much like the Tea Party movement, and largely by some of the same people. But the establishment class, they were a lot quicker to astroturf the whole movement than they were with the Tea Party movement.
Well, the thing about any popular front movement, whether it's Tea Party or Occupy, is that there is always a small core of ideologically committed people who know what they believe, and then there are a number of special, of people who are simply reacting according to their own perceived economic or political interests, who tag along. At some point, you can make an argument that Occupy itself has a 1% and a 99%. The Tea Party has a 1% and a 99%, and the 1% are the people who know what it is that they believe, and the 99% is everybody else.
That's a very interesting comparison there. Yeah, I was wondering, as thinking about that as well with the Tea Party, because there are some people out there who really are committed in trying to do something, and then there's this really weird fringe where I'm just wondering what planet they're from.
I mean, we have to remember that the Tea Party started out as the hardcore Ron Paul supporters who said, now that Ron Paul is out of the election, this is back in 2008, now that Ron Paul is out of the election, what are we going to do next? That was the seeds of what became the Tea Party.
Funny, I always dated it at the November 5th, 2007 money bomb.
Even before, even before the 2008 election.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It also brings open to the whole thing of, what will it take to rejuvenate this economy, given that, Ron Paul's prescription for it is a very bold endeavor. It's a very grand move on his part. But the other Republicans, like Mitt Romney or like Rick Perry, who really don't have anything exciting. It's so boring, so consistently Republican that they have no interest in bringing about any significant change to revive the economy as it is.
Well, I hate to continue to speak in metaphors having to do with the Titanic, but unfortunately the metaphor just works perfectly. So I'm going to use that metaphor, and then I'll anchor it, if you don't mind my extending that metaphor a little more. The way that people survived on the Titanic was remaining above the freezing water however they could. In other words, even if you were only on a piece of wood 2 inches above the freezing Arctic waters, you had a good chance of surviving until you reached something that was seaworthy and you could float, another boat or something like that. We're in pretty much the same situation here in terms of economics. You need to hang on to anything which will float above the Arctic waters. The Arctic waters being all these toxic unbacked assets that are dragging everything down, whether it's mortgages or bank accounts or anything that's going to be inflated away into nothingness. These are the Arctic waters, and anything which floats above it is any hard asset, anything which people will trade real consumables for, anything which you can keep your family fed and warm and sheltered with. And it basically comes down to that exact same strategy. You basically have to dismantle the above-ground economy for anything which will float and hang on to it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Anybody have any thoughts they want to share on the underground economy, ways that they might already be engaging in such practices?
I think it's going to crash and burn. but it's only a matter of time. It's already on borrowed time, and we're on a collision course for the country to default. So any attempt to try to prevent that is just very futile, as far as I'm concerned.
If I may, I also want to warn against everybody expecting some sort of Mad Max Book of Eli type scenario here. That's not what I'm talking about. While the economy is going to be collapsing around us, probably people are still going to be buying Kindle Fires and Android phones and iPads and a large segment of the economy will continue functioning because they will start trading in alternative things. A lot of traders are going to go to alternative currencies. A lot of traders are going to go to barter. So in other words, it's not like we're looking at a Mad Max scenario here, but what we are looking at are massive dislocations in Wall Street, in Washington, in state capitals, in which there's going to be a lot of unpredictability.
I think the best comparison would be then Weimar Germany, because they were the first world country that experienced hyperinflation. And they did not descend into complete chaos, descended into a much more ordered chaos. But there was a much better comparison there because of the way it progressed there when instead of rioting in the streets, got wheelbarrows of money to buy bread.
Yeah, and I think Weimar Germany is a very good modern example. But I think there are examples closer to home. I was living in Los Angeles during the 1992 riots, and there was a city that
that must have been exciting.
Well, exciting is not the word I would choose to use. Because I was an apartment manager at the time, walking armed patrols because they were burning apartment buildings about a mile from where I was managing. The point is that there will be times when you have major dislocations. I don't know how localized they're going to be. There is going to be other things where people are going to pretty much go about their business normally, but there will be new normals changing fairly rapidly.
Interesting. I work in the retail industry in human resources, and I'm looking at a lot of the stores. I'm working in the home improvement aspect of retail, and I've worked for both of the two major companies that are in that field, the one that's blue and the one that's orange. Not to talk about my current employer at all, but stores that were doing $100 million or $80 million a year in revenue 5 years ago are at 60 and 70 and 50. It's interesting to see how such a decline has happened when I figured, the economy going worse, fewer people would be buying houses, meaning they'd be spending more money on fixing their places. But in a lot of cases, it seems like they're just not spending the money at all because they don't have it. So I can already see what you're talking about, where things are getting dislocated a little bit, and that industry has had to lay a lot of people off. They've had to cut a lot of fat out. It's definitely really impacted customer service as well. So I'm just wondering how far that type of thing is going to spread across the entire economy. Not just in North America, but in Europe and Asia. What are we looking at 5 years down the road?
Well, the thing about uncertainty is that it's uncertain. The thing about unpredictability is that you can't predict it.
But if you're going to say 5 years down the road, we already know that's well past when Social Security goes bust, which is closer to 3 years down the road right now, or 4. So we know that there's going to be a major upheaval. We just haven't figured out what's on the other side of it yet.
All I can say is that the state of Utah had better have their gun turrets already installed to defend their socked away food supplies, because there will be people who are going to be hungry enough to come after it.
Yeah.
That's a pretty scary thought.
Sure is. I think everybody would be I hate to sound very ungentlemanly about this, but we're going to be shitting bricks by the time the whole thing begins to implode.
I mean, the only stability. The point is, we have warnings. We who have studied Austrian economics, we know that there's going to be dislocations. We know that the dislocations are going to be tied into things which are calculated in money and things which are dependent on licensing and that sort of thing. And so we have a pretty good idea where to sock away real assets so that we can survive this. And it's not rocket science, okay? You basically have to have long-term storage of consumable assets, whatever it is that you need to keep a community going. It's never too early to figure out plans, whether it's on the individual level or the family level or the community level or on the business level, to simply put assets into things which are not dependent on paper or ledgers. In other words, put it into real things which have utility, in times of dislocation.
Things you can trade, things you can consume.
I mean, I frankly think that an excellent investment portfolio right now is the name of a former federal department: alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
That's funny. Well, if anybody else has anything to add on this particular subject, I'd suggest we maybe make a switch over to healthcare.
Oh, I have something on this.
Sure, go ahead.
I love the idea of roving motorhomes, each one fitted out as a clinic, and when you go in there, every doctor is called Dr. Paul.
I like that. Hopefully, you don't have to wear masks like him.
No, really.
Go ahead, Todd.
Well, I was just going to say, the whole. It's interesting you bring up the whole healthcare discussion, because according to the New York Times, which is what we're discussing here, well, and this came out in the news that apparently, the healthcare law is going to be allowing states to tailor the benefits under the ObamaCare law. So I'm kind of scared as to exactly how that's going to pan out.
Well, there's an exception to that. There are some Republican governors who tried to say, can we tailor it by getting an exemption for our state? And the response was, sorry, no, 50% of the exemptions go to Nancy Pelosi's district. Which leads to what I've thought the direction the government is going for a long time, is that the law is not for any of the express purposes, but simply to be a club to use to bash your enemies over the head with.
That in itself is extremely destabilizing. When people lose confidence that that the law is there to protect them, that's when the shit hits the fan.
Well, I love it when Republicans object to Obamacare, but they never really object to anything like any other the type of health care programs like Medicare, or this is even better, the Children's Health Insurance Program.
Yes, Chip.
Well, if you look at the history, you'll find out that Obamacare is a latecomer to socialized medicine in the United States, because the government, maybe not at the federal level, but certainly at the state, county, and local level, has been interfering in medical care for well over a century. Licensing of medical schools, licensing of doctors, licensing of hospitals, FDA defining what are legal drugs, FDA defining what are legal medical devices. The point, and then you had veterans hospitals and regulation of medical insurance at the state and county and local level. forbidding companies from selling insurance across state lines. The point is that before we ever got to Obamacare, we already had virtually total control of every aspect of health care in the United States.
Yes. It is
right.
one of the more...
You're right.
Yes, healthcare is one of the more regulated industries out there. Second only to finance, and then there's the intersection of the two called insurance.
And HMOs.
Oh, that's part of insurance.
Right.
So insurance, the whole is health insurance is the single most regulated aspect of the economy because it's both finance and healthcare.
And we need to remember why employer-sponsored health insurance got into the market in the first place, because it was a way of companies being able to provide benefits to employees that didn't get taken out of FICA.
We got a call on from South Carolina here. I'm wondering who this is. Who is this?
Are you talking
from
to
South
me?
Carolina? Yeah.
Oh, 424. No, that's L.A. That's Los Angeles. If you're talking to me.
Oh, I think I know who that is. Do we have there the webmaster of Permacant?
Yeah. Well, sure. It is I. Arthur.
Gentlemen, if I may make an introduction, the gentleman who's just come on the line is a prominent libertarian science fiction author, the co-author of the alternate history science fiction novel Anarchia, J. Kent Hastings.
Welcome. Oh, hello.
Yeah, welcome.
I thought this was the listener line. Is there a place to listen on the web for those us ignorant?
Yeah, there is a. I'm posting it on my Facebook right now. I don't know if you're subscribed to my Facebook wall, but yeah, but there is one. Go to, or you can even go to letlibertyring.blogspot.com, which is my blog, and you can listen to the show live through the widget right there.
If you don't mind, since we have Kent here, Kent, do you have anything to say as far as protecting your assets during the dislocations to come?
Well, obviously we all have our specialties. I know that you're probably best known for the gun control things. So that's always, I've been listening to a lot of like survival shows, and of course one of the precious metals that doesn't get mentioned much is copper-jacketed lead, aka bullets. You might want to those on hand, much more than a club size.
Or to put it another way, you want to have two sorts of primers, the agarist primer and the sort of primer that you use to reload.
Whatever, yeah, so it depends on how primitive your firearm is. And let's see here. Okay, so my specialty is more like ham radio. So when they try to pull the plug on the kill switch on the internet, to have a flow of it. So, you know, if instead of getting just what's happening with the embedded reporters in the military, just government media, you could get reports outside of Twitter and Facebook, which might get shut down again. Well, they haven't down in the U.S. But
and plus, let's not forget that one of the things which the military did in various places they go is they put up little transmitters to create sort of like citywide local area networks, you know, sort of like local internets. And that's something that might become a tactic which communities might have to do, you know, if the internet ever has its kill switch pulled.
Sure. I mean, the Economist has noted that activity they were doing, and they came up with a thing a tactic that near our international border, like Canada or Mexico, you could have a very directional, high gain Wi-Fi
that might allow you to connect to the internet in another country. So if the U.S. got shut down but Mexico was still up, you could connect internationally that way. Or if, you could set up a clandestine ham radio type setup at spread spectrum or something. Spread spectrum, you can define channels by a spreading code, and it resists detection as an intelligence or disruption. It's a military technique. So you can have frequency hopping, which was invented by, there was some early work done by Hedy Lamarr, and I celebrate that in the novel that I covered with Brad Lineweaver, Anarchia. There's spread spectrum happening there by her, fighting the Nazis and the Stalin. But I digress. Anyway, so you can do frequency hopping. You have direct sequence, like a transmitted reference is another thing. You can look this stuff up on, if you Google it. There are digital synthesis tips that you can also Google and find out ones that you can on that. And if you're just a regular old operator, you can get commercial gear. Wouldn't necessarily be secure or anything, but it's not the kind of thing they're going to be focusing on shutting down. You'd still be able to talk internationally how the internet was, so you could have your nice non-profit friendly conversations despite all the stuff they're doing to the internet. That's what happened in Egypt and Libya.
Yes, Kent, but will we be able to play Angry Birds via ham radio?
Well,
that's the really important thing to know.
D-Star, you have internet access on 1.2 gigs. So if you have an advanced D-Star system, that allows you to connect to the internet using ham radio. I don't know if it would be affected by a kill switch here in the U.S. If I need to look up more about D-Star, but there are digital modes. You can certainly send digital data. Of course, the oldest digital mode is Morse code. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, there's iPhone apps and other smartphone apps will decode Morse code from the sound, and obviously there's lots of easy ways to automate sending it. So you can send and receive Morse code, even though you don't know it yourself.
Yeah, but that would largely be good for something like Twitter, where you have very small messages.
If all you're going to do is do 140 characters, you go back to 1930 and to hollow state radio, you're fine. So
that's pretty interesting.
Well, Kent, I was wondering before you got off, because I know you were going to go listen on the internet. I was just wondering if you've got a URL that you could share with our listeners so they can check out your works.
Well, permakent.com. Neil mentioned that. I got to do some more posts on there, and also similarly, resilientfreedom.org, resfree.org. They're kind of one's going to be more like a foundation. The other one's more like a personal thing, but.
Yeah, I have on my blog roll on J. Neil Schulman at Rational Review, I've got at least a link to Permakent. I may have Resilient Freedom up there also.
And they all, both of those sites link to each other as well. So.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for calling in. We really appreciate all the information you were able to share with the listeners.
Yeah, before you go,
Neil's pretty expert on guns and the things, and of course we both learned something about filmmaking and videography.
Kent was my film editor on my first film, Lady Magdalene's, and he's an associate producer. He was also an associate producer on Lady Magdalene's.
Oh.
And he's also going to be a producer and film editor on the film we're in production on right now, Alongside Night.
Yeah, so we've what did we call? We got that syncing feeling. Synchronizing sound and audio.
Yes. We're going to have the lovely job of syncing sound and video once again.
Yeah. Anything that could go wrong, we did it. So. Alrighty, I'm gonna go watch, listen, etc. on the web here.
All right. Well, thanks again for calling in. We really appreciate having you on the air.
Okay, sure.
All right.
Thank you.
Kent is one of the most low-key individuals I know because he has so many, separate skill sets in so many different areas that, he's one of those guys who was, building his own computer when he was 17, and his skill sets has only been, multiplying by leaps and bounds ever since.
There are a lot of useful skills out there. Can't learn everything, but while some people have been working on computers to an extent even beyond what I do, I have been working on learning how to be a farmer. That's how I'm planning.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, I have just about 5 acres of desert land here in Pahrump, Nevada, and I'm looking for a family of sharecroppers to come and work it, and I'm more than happy to take the traditional 25% for letting them use my land.
It's more rewarding when you're actually working your own land. I really enjoy the potato crop we get.
Well, here's a question.
And I'm very generous. I won't even require sleeping with the first night of their daughter.
Wow.
Wow. I'm speechless.
I'm afraid I didn't hear that.
I'm not going to touch that one.
I'm not going to touch that one either. Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, getting back to healthcare, I'm thinking about the underground economy that we were discussing and how healthcare would be affected. What do you see as possibilities popping up? Because it's just too expensive to even be sick right now, let alone a couple of years.
No, we already have an alternative healthcare system. In various different ways. It's called the nutritional supplement industry for one thing. You have a fitness industry. These are all various aspects of health maintenance, and very frankly, a lot of them are under attack by the FDA right now.
There's also the fact that lots and lots of doctors are slowly dribbling out of the whole government system and saying cash only or private insurance only, no Medicare. We're already getting the underground healthcare economy above ground.
And even so, there was a report, I don't remember what I was watching, where it was I think it was in the Boston area, a practice that accepts barter. And they only will allow physicians to join the practice if they will accept, I think it was 10% of their payment per month in barter. So where you may get somebody who's a carpenter who needs medical care, and he'll maybe do something for the doctor at his house, maybe repair his roof or something in exchange for the services provided. I'm just wondering if that's something that may be spreading.
Well, may I also point out that there is a category of doctors who are not allowed to legally practice. For example, just to give you the crudest example, the state of Florida will not accept a medical license from any other state. And so you need to basically qualify as a doctor in Florida as if you were starting from scratch, even if you've been practicing in Georgia for 25 years before that. So in other words, you have all sorts of situations where you have doctors who are basically not recognized and yet have the full skill set. And I imagine some of them are going to find their way into the underground economy. Doctors who have medical training overseas. Hell, even somebody like Dr. Conrad Murray may find himself useful in the black market. But unless you're dealing with Michael Jackson as your patient, you probably have a pretty good skill set.
That's a good point. Go ahead, Todd. Who is that?
I was talking about Dr. Conrad Murray, who's going to prison for 4 years because he gave Michael Jackson the drugs that Michael Jackson wanted.
Yeah, that's really messed up situation.
And not to mention, he's going to be stripped of his license because of the whole matter. And, what I find really idiotic about the whole healthcare situation, this means, this will also tie into the war on drugs, because you've got the DEA that's looking into what drugs will be dispensed even more than ever. Not that it hasn't been happening already, and not that it hasn't been happening for years, but it's going to be more so now that ObamaCare will be fully complete by 2014, should the transformation remains complete.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely going to be interesting to see, what we end up with healthcare-wise over the next 4 years, assuming that the regime change does not occur. Especially if he feels he's got a legacy to leave. I'm just afraid of what that's going to look like.
I'm wondering how long it's going to take for the medical marijuana dispensary to have a back room where doctors are giving where doctors are doing examinations and giving treatment for diseases. I mean, the situation is becoming again so unstable that alternative medicine is simply it's going to happen spontaneously. I don't know what you're. I haven't thought as a science fiction writer what the term is for a speakeasy, where you go not to drink but to get medical treatment. But I'm sure there is some term.
Well, I don't know if anybody has been watching the show on HBO. It's probably one of the best shows I've seen on TV, and it highlights a throwback to the Prohibition era. The original war on drugs, which is the war on alcohol. And this show is called Boardwalk Empire, and it really showcases how cops are bought off, how judges are corrupt, how the government is in bed with so many of the gangsters who are basically running the show in the black market, how they're smuggling the liquor, especially when it's supposed to be illegal under the Volstead Act. I mean, this is amazing.
It'll be even more poignant than that, because the incentive for a police officer to look the other way because he's being bribed is one thing, but the incentive of a police officer to look the other way because the illegal doctor is treating his wife is something entirely different.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point.
Or, to be politically correct, treating her husband.
Yeah.
Or, to be even more politically correct, treating her wife.
Oh.
There you go.
There you go. There you go.
There is another alternative that's already being used by a lot of people, and that's just going to another country. You can go to Mexico now for your dental care. And I've known
medical tourism is a huge industry right now.
It is.
Yeah, but they haven't finished the border fence yet.
It's interesting you bring up the border fence, Jason, because remember when Herman Cain was in the GOP race, he said he wanted to fry the Mexicans, and Michele Bachmann wants to refry them. A la Taco Bell.
Hey, listen, we seriously also have to ask the question: what about the Mexican doctors who are sneaking across the border as well, or the American doctors who are sneaking into Mexico to do treatments and then have to sneak back? The fact is that the black market can get very, very fluid.
That's true.
Technically, it's more of a gray market. A black market is goods that are truly illegal?
Well, all right. Let's start using the politically incorrect terms like counter economy and agorism and that sort of thing.
Well, I think Agora is going to be slowly transitioning into society, even in more record numbers than it has been within the last few years. Because, let's face it, the so-called private sector, which is the regulated sector, is really going to be fading away. It's on its last legs. It's not going to last.
I think that leads into one of the topics that I saw listed for tonight, which was the debate between Walter Block and Wendy McElroy regarding support of even a very libertarian political candidate, Ron Paul, whereas Walter Block seemed to think that Wendy McElroy had left the libertarian movement because she was not supporting Dr. Paul's candidacy. This was back in 2008. And on the other hand, Wendy McElroy takes a purist voluntarist position that any political activism is self-annihilating, and therefore that's the non-libertarian position. And in fact, this is where the rubber meets the road as far as figuring out what we're going to be doing over the next few years.
Now this is the thing that really pisses me off about the Block. I was going to have him on the show tonight, but I figure probably would be better to do it on a special episode or something. I think that this is a very important discussion here because Wendy has been a central figure in the libertarian movement for a long time, for a number of years. And Walter Block says, well, if you're not supporting Ron Paul, if you're not really a Ron Paul supporter, then you can't be a libertarian. Well, what he's really saying there is that a libertarian's credentials can be measured simply by the support of a politician who is, even if he's not 100% libertarian, say if he's 95%, still, if you don't support him, then you've got to be the enemy of liberty.
Yeah, I just love the way that the libertarian movement is starting to act like a country club where everybody is trying to blackball everybody else.
I don't go for that. I really think that, well, I'll put it this way. There is a blogger who I read who I don't always agree with, but I still respect him. He's a classical liberal student. He has freestudent.blogspot.com. He does not support Ron Paul because he feels he isn't libertarian enough. And I would never say that makes him not a libertarian. I think that there is room for disagreement. There are those who feel that Ron Paul departs in too many ways. I'm eager to support him because he's light years better than the other candidates in the race. But there is still room to say that there's room for improvements even on the best candidates.
Well, look, Ron Paul has been a sitting congressman for a number of terms. He is libertarian in theory. He is hardcore in libertarian rhetoric. There are areas in which other libertarians are going to disagree with him because he is a limited government libertarian. He's not an anarchist. He's not an agorist. But the fact is that for a political candidate, Ron Paul is about as good or better than any major party candidate in my lifetime, maybe years before my lifetime, and I'm 58 years old. I cannot remember another Republican or Democratic candidate in my lifetime as good as Ron Paul, and that includes Barry Goldwater, who was darned good. So Ron Paul, within the context of politics, is like a shining lantern. On the other hand, he is within a system which is going to fail, and I think he's aware of that. And I think that he's sort of like maybe like a bridge between the people who have a very limited idea of what the options are, and those of us who see other things possible.
Yeah. One thing about Ron Paul is, whether you love him or hate him, he is building a movement that's going to be around for years.
And it's largely a movement of people who probably agree with libertarians to a much larger extent than most other political or social movements going back a very long time.
Exactly.
Well, what do you see? Because obviously he's up there in age, and who knows how much longer he's going to continue doing it. What do you see as far as filling the void with regards to a principled libertarian at that level?
Well, he does have a son who's sitting in the United States Senate from the state of Kentucky right now. And while you might argue that Rand Paul is not as hardcore as his dad, he certainly stood up like a blazing figure in opposing this John McCain sponsored nullification of the Bill of Rights.
It's going to take a while to see exactly where Rand Paul is going to go. So far, I have not been disappointed with him, but he's still, in many ways, unmeasured. I think that he is actually, even if Rand Paul is less radical than his dad, he's still a bigger threat because he's already achieved higher office, and he's a lot younger, has a lot farther to go.
So he can go a lot higher in the time he's got left.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with anybody is that, there's always so much room, the higher you soar, the more room there is to fall. In mythology, it was Daedalus and Icarus soaring high. So Icarus's fall when the wax melted from his wings was greater. Or to go into the Judeo-Christian paradigm, it was the archangel Lucifer who had farthest to fall because he was so close to God. And in less grandiose terms, we have Benedict Arnold. Because Benedict Arnold won a battle without which the American Revolution would not have succeeded.
I would not agree with those analogies to Rand Paul. It's more like when...
but you want to know...
But when you said it's about seeing farther because he's standing on the shoulders of giants.
Well, of course. I mean, the point is, anybody who gets high up in politics, as power comes to somebody... the dangers of them wielding that power in a destructive way multiply. That's the danger with putting your faith in princes, which the Bible actually gives fairly good common sense advice against doing.
Well, in that case, we have to explain how many of us like Ron Paul because we're kind of putting some faith in his consistency.
Well, the problem with Ron Paul is that he's so good he makes politics look good.
Well, that's actually true, and here's the thing that I think a lot of people should really take into consideration here. I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but everybody has heard that. Well, before I get into this part here, we all know that Gary Johnson, who is Ron Paul's other competitor in the GOP race. He's actually less libertarian on some other issues than Ron Paul, whereas Ron Paul is less libertarian than Gary Johnson. It's sort of like a trade-off depending on who you want to support. But I think what I find particularly interesting about this is that he's now seriously considering moving his entire campaign from the GOP race into the Libertarian Party race.
I do not.
He's going to be officially making the move on Tuesday.
If I had his ear, I would tell him not to.
Yeah, even a failure in the Republican Party is more effective than a triumphant success in the Libertarian Party.
I would tell him that in 2008, Ron Paul was as ignored as Johnson is being ignored now. And supposing Ron Paul loses this race, Gary Johnson, by sticking it out, could position himself to be the Ron Paul of 2016.
If there is a 2016, I don't mean that literally, but I mean if there is a stable enough system whereby the 2016 presidential election has issues which can actually affect change. Because the whole point here is as the government becomes mired in debt, it will have less ability to move forth. And at which point, you're captaining the Titanic. You basically are losing your maneuvering ability.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing that on the world market, where a pipsqueak, really, there's no other word for it, where a pipsqueak nation like Iran can hack the GPS on a top-level U.S. drone and land it. You sort of get the idea that the old gang ain't what it used to be.
Right.
Yes, but the Titanic analogy falls apart after the boat is sunk, because there will still be these people here and this and here and these resources here ready to rebuild. The Titanic itself is on the bottom of the ocean.
No, you're right. You're right. Any literary analogy, any metaphor can only go so far.
My point.
The point is that you are going to have. What you have to watch out for is what I like to call the rampage. Okay, and the rampage is when local authorities or authorities in various different agencies basically just start getting very, very grabby and out of control, just try to keep themselves afloat. And, that's sort of something to be worried about, too.
Okay, but the point of what I said about 2016 is there will be something here, and if Johnson plays his card right, he can be there to position himself to pick things up and put them back together.
Well, let me ask you a
picking up and putting it back together is not going to happen from within the system. It's going to happen from without the system. It's the economy which has to rebuild. The political system is still going to be flailing around.
Well, let me ask you a question on this point, which is, what would be the worst consequence coming out of Johnson running on the LP ticket, Jason?
He would make himself irrelevant.
Well, if Johnson does jump to the other party, the worst consequence is, he's better than Barr was, but it will be, in a way, a repeat of the whole Barr fiasco. In fact, I'm really tired of having to deal with people treating the Libertarian Party as a place for disaffected Republicans to jump ship to. Alaska was smart enough to say no to Murkowski. Rhode Island was smart enough to say no to Daniel Gordon, but the LP was not quite clever enough to catch Barr in time. And we don't want to say, sure, I don't care what your ideology is, just come here if you're a Republican who got ignored.
Look, the problem with the Libertarian Party is that, like every other minor party, it doesn't have an ability to attract capital and grow. It does not have a business plan where it can cross a chasm from from its pioneers to even early adopters, to even mass market. The major parties have been so successful in creating barriers against independent and third-party candidates that politics in this country are basically bipolar, Democrat or Republican, like it or hate it. That's where the candidates come from who wield power. The Libertarian Party, as useful I think it has been at various times in getting forth libertarian ideas, as possibly useful it has been in local races, has never elected a senator, doesn't have a congressional delegation, There is no Libertarian caucus in either house. There is no major Libertarian faction in any state legislature, although there have been elected Libertarians in state legislatures. It's never gotten to the point where there's been a caucus able to that has to be consulted on major legislation. And the fact is, the point of a political party is to wield political power, and the Libertarian Party has just never done that.
Well, it's worse than that, Neil. The problem with the LP is that it's never really been set up as a serious political organization to deal with the federal government. It's never been set up that way. It was never even structured that way from the very early days when David Nolan put it together. So this whole idea that somehow you can just, elect all these candidates and hope that, you can praise Jesus thinking, hey, I can probably get maybe 15 or 20% of the vote. That's never happened. And with the exception of candidates being elected at the state level, and more often than not candidates at the local level, you've never had any candidates elected to the congressional or Senate level. So the Libertarian Party has never been a very adequately structured political party set up specifically for that. It's always been set up as an organization to throw a monkey wrench into the political system.
In other words, on occasion, it's been a spoiler.
Yeah. What about you on this, Stephen? Your thoughts on Johnson getting into this whole party business with the LP?
Oh, I personally don't think it's going to have any effect at all on the outcome. Possibly 100,000 more votes than Barr got. He does have some name recognition, but if you go back just a few years, there was another governor that ran for president. Lester Maddox ran in '76, and he'd only been out of office for 5 years, and he had a popular, not a popular, but he had a running mate that was a former. He was a prominent former mayor of Madison, Wisconsin. And he didn't get hardly any votes,
right?
Even in his home state of Georgia.
And in 2010, the Libertarian Party only got 2%, 3%, 4% of the vote in some areas when people were running for Congress. That's sort of a very teeny-weeny improvement over the years. But it's still got a long way to go, and even if it did get somewhere next year, it's really done a very shitty job putting a lot of the resources. I mean, the state party doesn't even have the kind of money in the capital. Even as you said, Neil, it doesn't even have the money in the capital to really finance state parties, and it's really not set up for that.
Well, and how could it be? Because, to the extent which it is a libertarian party, it's trying to repeal the redistribution of stolen assets. It's trying to stop that, which is what fuels politics. Politics is about taking money from Peter and giving it to Paul. That's all of politics is based on the idea of redistribution of income. All of it, 100% of it. It's not just a socialist thing. It is what politics is as its nature, is redistribution of income, redistribution of property. All politics, down to the core, is based on the primary premises which are, in modern terms, are identified as socialism.
Well, what's really funny that since you brought up Bob Barr, Jason, and even you, Stephen, did anybody hear that he's endorsing Newt Gingrich?
Yes, the liberventionists were capable of shame, they'd be feeling it right now.
Well, look, I can't be too critical of that because I've had, because the point is that all of politics is a Hobson's choice, and if you're choosing among the lesser of evils, then you're going to still get somebody who's evil, and it sometimes gets very, very subjective as to which is the lesser evil.
But Neil, here's the problem with that, Neil. The argument doesn't really work anymore. I mean, the fact matter is, Neil. The fact matter is that Newt Gingrich just recently came out calling the Palestinian people an invented people, which is a profoundly racist statement as far as I'm concerned. And this fuckwit, Bob Barr, throwing his weight around him really shows exactly how well that Bob Barr was never really taking seriously the Libertarian Party, let alone their philosophy. And
look, and anybody who's served as a United States federal attorney and a sitting congressman is plugged into a system, and their perceptions are going to be political perceptions. Okay? Now, from his political perception, he may see a slight advantage in a direction that he cares about, which gets to endorse Newt Gingrich. Now, from an outside the system libertarian standpoint, or from my own, as I jokingly call it, my limited anarchist standpoint, obviously, it's not a libertarian move. But it's like asking for a libertarian move, inside the mafia or the Vatican or something like that.
There's got to be a better Republican bar to endorse than someone who called for death penalty in the drug war.
Well, I'm disappointed that Bob Barr hasn't endorsed Ron Paul. I mean, it really would have been swell if he had.
I would understand him withholding an endorsement from Ron Paul on the grounds of their disagreements in 2008, which...
Well, it's probably some sort of, grudge or something like that, which is why he didn't do it. It may be something personal, which has absolutely nothing to do with politics.
But there's failure to endorse Ron Paul or endorsing someone else, say Johnson or even Huntsman, but then there's endorsing Gingrich.
Well, from the standpoint of somebody who plays serious politics, they're probably looking at the likely candidate being either Mitt Romney or Newt Gingrich. And if you make your options small enough, then you're going to get a very small answer.
Yeah, Gingrich is a small answer.
Right. The fact is that we're talking about we're talking about people here who are not libertarians, And if Bob Barr finds that his venture into the Libertarian Party was self-annihilating, which it was, because if you look at the votes that he got, they're pretty insignificant and don't add up to anything. He may have decided he's sick of being submarginalized. But again, it's like trying to stick your head above water when the bow of the Titanic is bearing down on you. I love getting back to that stupid analogy.
Speaking of the Titanic, I'm just wondering, something I've been watching and wondering about. I figured with the economy going as bad as it is and things looking generally dismal, I would have thought there would have been more people coming to the Libertarian Party for the answers they're not getting from the Democrats and Republicans, but I'm not really seeing that.
Well, what we are seeing is something remarkable. We're seeing the only solid anti-war candidate being in the Republican Party. And historically, that's something that that's remarkable.
What do you think going forward the chances are, though, of the libertarian movement getting any larger during this period of displacement, as you put it before?
Well, in fact, what's happening is that anybody who has a serious libertarian motive within the political system is being drawn largely to Ron Paul because he's the only game in town.
I'm just interested in seeing what's going to happen once he's no longer, doing it. I got to think after he's.
The danger is, of course, is that you're going to have activist burnout. What we used to call browning out. After Harry Brown, his idea of dropping out, back from his books in the 1970s. Okay, which I had as brownies and alongside night. Activist burnout from the Libertarian Party is something that Sam Conkin was always talking about, the problem with the Libertarian Party is that there were people who were hardcore libertarian activists who were energized in movement activities like organizing conferences and demonstrations and various things like that, and then they would get involved in a political campaign and they would get their heart torn out, and then they would go back to do something else and end up as irrelevant as a yuppie or something like that. And there's been this churning for years and years and years, decades, of people who have had their hearts torn out and the lifeblood sucked out of them by devoting themselves to these campaigns, which because of the way that politics works in the United States, was never going to accomplish anything. And it's a self-annihilating sort of thing. It's a way of keeping a movement from gaining ground. Now, here we have something within the Republican Party which is really scaring the establishment. The Ron Paul campaign is frightening. The way that Fox News has to work overtime over and over and over again to tell its viewers it's a two-man race, and it's always two other people than Ron Paul, no matter how high Ron Paul is in the actual polls. The two-man race is always two other people. Lets you know how frightening the Ron Paul campaign is to the establishment, because within their terms, what he's talking about is fundamentally radical. Talking about the Constitution seriously scares the shit out of these people. They don't want anybody talking about the Constitution. That's the last thing they want. Even if you think that the Constitution is this contract forged in hell, as Lysander Spooner and William Lloyd Garrison and everybody else would speak about it, I can't remember who said it. It might have been Jerry Pournelle. The Constitution is a wonderful idea. We should try it sometime.
Yeah, I heard it in a while. Go ahead, Todd.
Well, I was going to say, look at what Sean Hannity tried to do to Ron after the debate on the 15th. I mean, by the way, the whole debate was pretty boring, but Ron kicking Michele Bachmann's ass was the best thing that ever happened on the air.
That was wonderful, but even more wonderful, by the way, was Jay Leno's interview with Ron Paul last night. It was the best political interview I've seen in the entire season, because Jay Leno did not throw softball questions at Ron Paul, but he gave him real questions and allowed him to answer.
Right. And what really pissed me off was when Sean Hannity tried to bring up the old racist newsletter controversy. Which had nothing to do with what Ron talked about on the floor that night.
Look, I am starting to realize how similar a lot of talking point tactics on news television is, on things like Fox News. How similar the tactics are to the trolls on the Internet Movie Database.
But back to the topic of how this impacts libertarianism in the long run, I think the economy is going to do more for that. It's getting the word out so that people can hear about it. But I think when the economy goes bust, and the ones who care the most are those who studied Austrian economics, it's going to have an impact, I think.
Well, there's nothing that teaches economics so much than having your business go out of business. Even running an inn in New England taught George McGovern an awful lot about economics.
So speaking of business, one of the topics that we did have was the National Transportation board's call to ban the use of cell phones while driving. Not the use of not with wireless headsets, but holding and dialing and all of that with an actual cell phone while on the road. Obviously, they can't make it a national law, but they're calling on states to go ahead and pass some sort of regulation that would prohibit use of cell phones on the road.
Yeah, they'll use the same sort of sort of blackmail they use with the 55.
Actually, Jim, they're including wireless headsets they want to ban too.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Well, I wonder if OnStar is going to be included in that.
Or better yet, CB radios like the truckers use, which ties back into our earlier discussion on shortwave radios.
Well, in fact, there in many state laws there has been a cutout for ham radio, so that operating a ham radio while driving is not subject to the same laws as cell phones. But I believe the new federal law is trying to be more sweeping and making it any electronic device.
But isn't this going to create a black market for people who want to use cell phones, especially when they want to drive while texting or
Well, what you will have the exact same thing you had happening in the 70s when you had the fuzzbusters, which were made illegal, and people used them anyway.
Yep. And
I remember fuzzbusters and CB radio and all that. It always comes back to Princess Leia. The more you tighten your grip, the more systems will slip through your fingers.
Yeah, there'll be a market for something that will counteract whatever the regulation happens to be. Somebody will come up with some way to both counteract it while making money off of it at the same time. I do still have a radar detector. I haven't used it in years, but I'm familiar with that.
I got a law.
A lot of tickets.
I have an idea. Why don't we make it illegal for federal bureaucrats to drive on the roads? That way they'll just take the bus.
Hey, I'm already getting entrepreneurial ideas of how to get around this law. Are you ready for this? It's basically cell phones that look like coffee mugs.
Works for me.
Yeah, with the AM PM logo on it. The AM PM Martin logo on it.
Maybe we should also design, like sunglasses or just regular glasses that work as cell phones too. That way you can actually.
Well, in fact, micro miniaturization is just is just so possible nowadays that you're absolutely right. A pair of sunglasses could absolutely function as a cell phone.
Well, they already have sunglasses that are also video cameras.
Well, all right. So you change the chip slightly, and it's your cell phone.
Yeah.
And not only that, you have this new Android app, which is I love that it's named after Major Roddenberry. And so you'll have the sunglasses with the Major Roddenberry app in it. And it'll all be voice activated.
Liking that idea. I'm wondering if with this, one thing I liked when I first started getting involved in the Liberty movement was the LP really went after a couple of key initiatives that had nothing to do with electing anybody to office, and one of them was that banking regulation, know your customer. This right here seems like a golden opportunity for them to become relevant again by stepping up and opposing this particular nonsense. I just don't see anything coming out of it.
Look, the more laws they pass, all they're going to do is they're just going to be building the counter economy and just hastening their own doom.
Oh yeah. Well, what I liked about I think what's really interesting here is that this is going to definitely create a lot more anger and hatred by the drivers on the roads. I mean, what's next? You're going to make it illegal for people to text and tweet while they're walking on, say, the sidewalk or on a public sidewalk, in a parking lot. I mean,
they already have. You're not talking about the future. You already have municipal regulations in some cities. We're walking and texting at the same time gets you a ticket. This is not in the future. You have that right now in some places.
That's horrible. I was listening to Elliot in the morning, he's kind of a local shock jock on the DC airwaves, and they were talking about this issue with regards to the banning of cell phones in cars. And so many people were calling in pissed off. They're like, I don't care. I'm not going to go along with it. I'm going to violate the law. Wait and see how many people start suing in response the first time somebody dies because they weren't able to make an emergency phone call while driving. I'm just wondering. I do think, though, that it will help spur along the underground economy. I'm just wondering how big a fight that states will put up against it.
Look, I'm surprised that smokers in New York, put up with the anti-smoking regulations there. I mean, Parisians didn't knuckle under that way when they tried that in Paris. I mean, you talk all you want about all the economic, the so-called economic freedom in the United States as compared to the semi-socialist, countries in Western Europe. But the fact is that very often Italians and French and various other nationalities there aren't as manipulable. They're just far used to the government trying to tell them what to do, and they ignore them better. The trouble with Americans is that for too long they've actually had faith in the rectitude of their government. If the government wants to do away with that, okay, do away with it and suffer the consequences. The less that people believe in the Compact of 1787 and the Bill of Rights of 1791, the less people believe that the law is on their side, the less that they believe that the law is there to protect them, the more they are going to create an underground class which will do to them what the American revolutionaries did to the Tories in the 1770s. And I say, bring it on. Do your work, motherfuckers.
Steve, I'm just curious. Do you drive a car with a cell phone? And if so, do you have a hands-free device?
I have no hands-free device, and I never call anybody while I'm driving. I don't talk on the phone, but people do call me, and
I feel bad for the people out there who are actually entrepreneurs who are, on the car, trying to, do business calls. And next thing you know, some cop car comes up behind them, flashes their red and blue lights, and telling them, pull over, and we're going to ticket you. By the way, you do it again, we'll cuff you.
Look, eventually it'll get to the point where people can't afford insurance anymore, so they won't have insurance, and they figure, hey, I'm not getting insurance anymore, so why should I bother registering my car? Hey, I'm not registering my car anymore, so why should I bother getting a driver's license? Okay? These things cascade. Okay? The more they whip you off, the more they create these barriers, the more regulations they impose, the more the more they do this, the more and more people simply say, fuck it, it's not worth it.
Yeah, what's next? We're going to ticket people for eating while driving. We're going to ticket people.
And you can't. They can't put them in jail because they don't have any space in the jails. When Lindsay Lohan gets sentenced to 4 months or something like that, and she serves 6 hours, it lets you know the system doesn't work anymore. It's a joke. And once people understand that, they stop getting frightened.
Well, it also feeds into this desire that our august rulership has of having us all travel by public transit instead, which is easier to track.
Yes, but the point is that only works in dense, small enough areas, municipal areas like New York, Boston, or Chicago, or something like that. It can't possibly work in a Dallas or a Houston or a Los Angeles. It can't work in Nevada, where there are just vast stretches of nothing. I mean, State Road 127 between Shoshone, California, and Baker, California, is essentially 60 miles of absolutely nothing. There is no public transportation.
And that again feeds into it, because if we're all confined to the cities, we're again more easily controllable.
But they can't do it. It's not practical. There are economic limits to their manipulations.
I didn't say it was practical. I said it was what they wanted.
Well, I mean, the point is that if they want to pass laws to effect, then all they're doing is they're basically making everybody criminals, and the system collapses on itself once again. Law only works when you can enforce it. At the point when you have so many regulations that nobody can even figure out what the law is, nobody pays attention anymore.
Well, here's the problem that nobody wants to talk about. One of the things that has actually led to this started with seatbelts many years ago. When the auto industry started, pushing for seatbelts, then you had many lobbying groups, special interest groups, that demanded that drivers wear their seatbelts because all on account of their claims of public safety. Well, no, many of them just wanted a kickback and a subsidy for it. And on top of that, this would be great revenue for the states. Well, guess what?
People lose track. People lose track of how quickly these things change, okay? Go on, put on the movie Oh God Book 2, okay? The one where you have the little girl who has the meeting with God, okay? And what do you find out? You find out that the little girl is climbing into her dad's Jeep. And all of a sudden, she's getting in there, no seatbelt, no nothing. Well, this is a movie which was made in the late 1970s, early 1980s. It hasn't been that long.
Right. And on top of that, one of the biggest problems here is that with the seatbelt laws that have been around for many years, there have been more accidents with mandatory seatbelts, like the click-it or ticket laws in place, than would have been otherwise. Well, imagine how many people are going to be dying on the roads, even more so, if they're going to be prohibited from using a cell phone. What if somebody is having a heart attack? What if somebody, what if the laws are amended to basically say, say an ambulance can't, call 911 and say, we're taking this patient to the hospital because it's illegal, because the drivers are not paying attention, therefore they could cause an accident.
The point is that, obviously they're always going to be putting in exemptions for emergency use, but the fact is that that's always, what is an emergency is always going to be up to the opinion of a magistrate.
It's an emergency.
We also have to look at the law of unintended consequences. It's been demonstrated that when you do not have a bike lane on a road, the drivers are more cautious looking out for the bicyclers than if you do, where there are more bicyclists hit by cars. And the seatbelts can tie back into that. We are safer, therefore we can take bigger risks.
While we're at it, Mom can take out, those little cup trays that we have in the cars, so that nobody can go to McDonald's and buy their Mickey D's and their French fries and their large Diet Cokes while they're on the go because they might be late for work. While we're at it, why don't we take out the AM, FM radios or the CD players? While we're at it, hey, why don't we make it illegal for people to talk in the car? Because that can be very distracting for drivers on the roads.
They can't have kids in the car, period, because they don't shut up, and they can be a pretty big distraction driving. Children are illegal now in cars.
How about not one of the biggest distractions for drivers is having children, so not allowing children in cars?
Yeah.
Kids fighting in the back seat. I'm sorry. You can't have your kids in the car anymore. The point is, it reaches absurdity very fucking quickly.
Yes, it does. It's just another instance of nanny sadism, and unfortunately, I'm sure that a lot of states will probably get on board with this right away and say, "Okay, we want that federal highway."
You want to know? You want to know what's even worse than supposedly somebody using a cell phone and then gets into a 3-car or 4-car or 5-car pileup? People sleeping while driving. You've got truckers on the road, and I swear to fuck, you've got a lot of these rigs, these drivers who are on the road 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 hours a day. They barely get enough sleep as it is. And a lot of times, I've seen many of them who really don't do a very good job of patting down a lot of their equipment. And a lot of their equipment and shit can fly out of the truck and cause a major accident on the highways. So, why don't we take them down?
Well, not only that, how about people who have these 2-hour commutes to work, Trey? How tired are they? Okay, and so now they have to have their coffee, but oh no, you can't drink your coffee in the car because that's distracting. Okay, how many accidents are caused by that?
True.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And we can't make the world completely safe, and often the cost is too high if we try.
The point is, we're dealing here with morons.
Well, unfortunately, you can't outlaw stupidity. You have to let nature take care of that.
Well, I mean, if you look at the American Revolution, it was basically caused by the British government being fucking stupid. If you look at the way that Britain lost India, it was because the British were acting fucking stupid. If you look at the way that the whites lost their monopoly rule in South Africa, it was because they were being fucking stupid. If you look at the way that Jim Crow was done away with in the South, it was because the Southern whites were acting fucking stupid.
And that's because they lost the essential feedback loop that power insulates you from.
Right, and that's exactly the problem. It's something that Robert Anton Wilson talked about endlessly. Was the isolation of classes because when somebody is below you is frightened of you, they lie to you. They tell you what you want to hear, and you're caught in an endless feedback loop.
Might be a good idea for everyone who gets to high political office to hire an advisor whose only job is to disagree with them.
Right? Yeah. Like that job is going to have legs to it. I mean, my God! I mean, do you remember when President George H.W. Bush went into a supermarket first time and was surprised at how they were how they were scanning the barcodes? He'd never seen it before. I mean, politicians, who are driven around in limousines, they get very out of touch very quickly. I mean, Michelle Obama off to shop at Target. Maybe the only thing which is keeping Barack Obama sane.
Yes, and there was that guy who got harassed by the Secret Service because he called the Iraq War disgusting to Cheney's face.
Right. Well, paranoia is not a good way to keep in touch with reality either.
Speaking of paranoia, we got things heating up now with Iran too. You got, people rattling sabers left and right now, talking about we're giving them their opportunity and they're not taking care of business. It's the same rhetoric that happened before we decided to make Iraq the 51st state.
Oh, of course, and that was a point which Ron Paul made beautifully, both in the debates and on Jay Leno. But the point is that you listen to Bill O'Reilly, doing one of his rants or something like that against Ron Paul. And it's like the guy, didn't live through the Cold War. Does he really think that the people who are running Iran are such religious fanatics. And by the way, I don't believe that anybody in power actually believes in God to the extent that they're willing to destroy their country out of their faith. I don't think any of these ayatollahs or imams or whatever it is have that level of faith that they're willing to take a nuclear explosion in their capital to prove their faith. I don't believe it. Okay, I believe that when you have a country like Iran, which just may end up getting its first 1945 level Hiroshima level bomb, when they are facing 20,000 thermonuclear missiles from the United States, and by the way, probably some from the Soviet Union or China too, because they're not all that Muslim friendly. Okay, I think that they might tread a little cautiously before they launch a nuclear attack on Israel, which has 300 plus nukes of its own. And by the way, that 300 figure, how outdated is that? Is it 1,000 now? Is it 2,000 now? Have they been? We never find out how much Israel is enriching uranium and what their missiles are tipped with at this point. We don't know. It may be that Israel at this point has a nuclear arsenal capable of wiping out every Arab in the Middle East. I don't know.
Try as I might, I just can't convince myself that Iran is such a big threat that it's going to destroy the U.S.
No, they never talk about it destroying the U.S. They talk about it destroying Israel. I don't think that's possible to Iran, and very frankly, I don't think, as dumb as I think politicians are, I don't think they're dumb enough, to basically say, hey, you know what? Let's just try throwing a couple of atomic bombs onto Tel Aviv, and let's see what happens.
Actually, considering that Islam considers many of the sites in Israel to be holy in and of itself, I don't think they would want to nuke it. They'd want, if they were aggressive, they'd want to take it over.
Well, and that, by the way, is a rational point which I never hear talked about. If you actually believe that the Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the holiest sites in Islam, as they claim, then Jerusalem is safe.
Yeah. They just don't want the people who are currently there.
Right. If you tell me that Iran is developing a neutron bomb, maybe I'll believe you.
Now they're not even getting to the regular nukes yet.
Very, very frankly, I believe in the Disney solution here. I think that we ought to just basically take Israel and turn it into a theme park.
Well, this is the thing about what Ron Paul said to Michele Bachmann about Iran. And he mentioned about when he was drafted into the military in 1962 at the height of the Cold War, specifically when Kennedy was dealing with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he tried to speak to Khrushchev. And he said, "Well, we can't have these missiles and whatnot, but let's do it another way, rather than just send our people in." And Ron Paul made some very excellent points about that entire matter. But what's really interesting is that Michele Bachmann wrote it off. All she wants to do is carpet bomb Iran and basically, establish a new world order. I'm not talking.
Look, Michele Bachmann doesn't know what state Concord Bridge is in, and she can't tell the difference between John Wayne and John Wayne Gacy, for God's sake.
Sounds like she could be president. Very. I'm just wondering if Obama ends up believing that he's not looking tough enough, if he might escalate something with regards to Iran as a means of counteracting any gains that whoever the GOP nominee ends up might be making.
I would love to see Ron Paul get the GOP nomination just to see, the terror in the eyes of Bill O'Reilly and the rest of the Fox News crowd. I would just love to see it, okay? I mean, the terror you're going to see in their eyes if he simply comes in first in Iowa is going to be beholden. If he manages to pull off a second place finish in New Hampshire, they're going to be wetting their pants.
Well, the press refuses to acknowledge him as a top tier candidate. If he wins in Ohio, they'll drop him to third tier. If he wins the nomination, they'll drop him to fourth tier. And if he wins the presidency, they'll drop him to fifth tier.
No. This is what I already have what the News Corporation of America headlines and Fox News headlines are going to be if Ron Paul wins the presidency in 2012. It'll be Barack Obama made a stunning second place finish in the presidential race.
Yeah, really. I mean, think about it. This is the same guy, Ron Paul, who won the Drake University straw poll. And I thought that was just awesome last week when he did this. And now
he won the straw poll among the social conservatives, and he's the guy who's for legalizing everything. Oh my God!
Yes, it's really interesting just how many people support him until it ends up at the ballot box. So we wanted to see if maybe interested to see if he can take a state or two, or play so high that they go from pissing their pants to shitting themselves.
If Ron Paul manages to pull off first place in Iowa and second place in New Hampshire, okay, watch what's going to happen in the South, because when you get to a Super Tuesday, it'll be very interesting what happens, because the fact is Ron Paul is already raising a lot of money right now. Imagine if he starts winning primaries, what the money is going to be like.
Don't forget, he's already very well positioned in Nevada.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact is that he won Nevada last time. I don't know if you guys know this story enough. I live here in Nevada. I know it pretty well. But if you don't know what happened in 2008, I was in the Nye County caucus for Ron Paul. Okay, and it gets to the Nevada State Republican Convention, and at the point when it became clear that Ron Paul had more votes than John McCain in the Nevada State Republican Convention, and that Nevada was going to send a Ron Paul committed delegation to Minneapolis to the National Republican Convention, they adjourned the convention, okay, and the Reno Gazette-Journal did a count afterwards. They opened up these sealed boxes after the election, okay, and counted it up, and they confirmed Ron Paul had more votes than John McCain. It was going to be a Ron Paul delegation, and they adjourned the Republican State Convention to prevent the voting from being registered, and then in some sort of secret political move, they sent the John McCain delegation illegally to the convention. Now, guess where they got this idea? This was how Karl Marx handled things at the First Communist Internationale.
Interesting.
Thought it was how Lenin handled things over and over. Karl Marx mostly just wrote books over and over.
No, Karl Marx actually participated in the First and Second Communist Internationale.
By the way, this is a very interesting topic that came up last week. And, Jim, you can even talk about this and get into this. But Obama did a speech in Osawatomie, Kansas. I think that's if I'm pronouncing it right. But he did the speech saying, capitalism and liberty don't work. It never has. And
tried it.
And I thought this was funny as hell.
Well, here's the problem, okay? You don't have a clean case to look at, because at the time in the United States when the economy was freest, you also had the most social restrictions. You had women being disenfranchised and in many states not being allowed to own property. You had blacks and Chinese and very often Irish, Italians, and Jews being treated as second-class citizens. And so, you never had a balance where you had both social liberty that was clearly established, along with economic liberty that was clearly established. So the point is, we've had this odd progression whereas you've had a more universalization of social standing of minorities. At the same time, you've had a total disempowerment to disenfranchised of any actual defense of property rights and economic liberty.
So there are two things to say to that. First thing to say is, when was the last time within Obama's lifetime that we even came close to having a free market? And Obama has no basis to compare. And the second thing, dang, I just forgot it. Talking about, what you talked about, how we have a greater franchise. I know a person, and this is third hand by the time you hear it, who actually believes that we are all free as long as our chains weigh just as much as each other's chains. I thought he's crazy.
Well, I love how he writes here, or what he says here. Now, just as there was in Teddy Roosevelt's time, there's a certain crowd in Washington for the last few decades have said, let's respond to this economic challenge with the same old tune. The market will take care of everything they tell us. If only we cut more regulations and cut more taxes, especially for the wealthy, our economy will get stronger. Sure, they say there will be winners and losers, but if the winners do really well, then jobs and prosperity will eventually trickle down to everybody else. And then they argue, even if prosperity doesn't trickle down, well, that's the price of liberty.
Well, in fact, trickle-down economics does work. It's trickled down to China. It's trickled down to Malaysia. It's trickled down to South Korea. It's trickled down everywhere but here.
Yeah, and he also says here, well, now it's a simple theory, and we have to admit it's one that speaks to our rugged individualism and our healthy skepticism of too much government. That's in America's DNA, and that it fits well on a bumper sticker. But here's a problem. It doesn't work. It has never worked. Are you fucking shitting me, Barry?
Well, the problem is that there's an awful lot of historical examples of corruption. The point is, people. God, it almost gets me to stuttering. You had city machines which were totally corrupt. You had Tammany Hall, you had Kansas City, you had Chicago, you had the Black Hand. The point is, local politics acted to control people in ways that really has just been federalized. But you've had corrupt politicians. Look what happened with the Osage, the way that they were treated. You've had you have tons of examples that anybody on the right or left, any honest historian can use, where at various points people have been deprived of their rights and liberties by corrupt political gangs, and the hand in hand of politicians and businessmen, goes back and goes back and goes back. The thing is that there was a frontier. There were places where you had a better chance, even in cities. My grandfather was Jewish, but that didn't prevent him from amassing a fortune when he came over here in the 1890s and with virtually nothing, and built it up into a multi-million dollar personal wealth, which he managed, of course, to lose in 1929. But the fact is that there was greater opportunity than. What it really comes down to is upward mobility. That's the whole deal about America. Is upward mobility. That's the thing which shocked the world, because the world never really had that before. Upward mobility, being able to grow out of the class or ethnicity or category that society had plugged you into when you were born. That is the American ideal, which has revolutionized much of the world. Upward mobility is the whole game.
Sure. Just wanted to pass some news on to everybody here. Of course, we know about everyone's probably familiar with Bradley Manning, who's looking at a long time in prison for what are basically bullshit charges. And it's interesting, though, that the war that he's protesting apparently just ended. Well, at least on paper it did. All the last remaining U.S. troops have now marched out of Iraq, and they are in Kuwait awaiting redeployment to hopefully to home, but I'm sure that we'll be building up troops somewhere else. But anyway, just figured I'd pass that along. That just came from CNN.
Yeah, well, victims of wars regularly outlast wars for a really long time.
Definitely. But I just wanted to get the panel's, views on what's going on with Bradley Manning right now. What are his chances of ever seeing daylight again?
Well, I mean, the fact is that what did Bradley Manning do that wasn't done with the Pentagon Papers? It's the same thing, pretty much.
Considering how politically charged his case is, he will be seeing jail time, but I don't think he'll be seeing life.
Well, this is the thing about Manning. Since he was in that really god-awful, decrepit jail cell, I'm telling you right now, I mean, he was, if I remember correctly, months ago, I think it was like within the last couple of years or so, he was pretty much,
It was torture.
if I remember correctly, he was tortured. He was nude. He had very little access to food and water. He had no outside contact with anybody. Nobody would be allowed to visit him. He was cut off from the rest of the world. He was basically a prisoner by the military establishment, by the military industrial complex. So, they might as well just put a gun to his head, pull the trigger, and blow it to pieces. So, because now, they slammed him with these 23 counts, and because he knowingly gave intelligence to the enemy, though indirect means. Well, you know what? The state has become the enemy. And you're telling me that the state, the government, hasn't been giving away intelligence to a lot of its allies in the Middle East, particularly many of them who have terrorist connections, for crying out loud.
Of course, and now you're making the key point. The fact is that there is what we're devolving into. What we're devolving into is what the American Revolution was about. In other words, there were rules for the king's favors, and there was rules for everybody else. Well, you can't expect to maintain a society on that basis because people get mad and they fight back eventually.
What do you say, Steve?
Just that Bradley Manning is he's a hero for anybody that believes in transparency and government.
You have whistleblower statutes for precisely that sort of thing, but of course they're not applying it to him.
Right. I want to go back to the troops coming out of Iraq real quick. I read the other day that we were sending 50,000 mercenaries from the old Blackwater Company into Iraq now, for another 50,000. So
who's paying for it?
Isn't that a surprise?
Who's paying for it?
No, we are.
Well, the magic.
Our children are.
Yeah, well, I mean, understand that eventually these guys are going to run out of money.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
No, they have a printing press.
I mean, have you noticed how often we are hearing stories right now of $1 billion being missing, and people act as if it's just a normal thing? Excuse me, $1 billion and you don't know what happened to it? Hello, am I living in Atlas Shrugged?
Yeah, I got $1 billion just laying around, and I don't know where it's at. Meanwhile, I'm gonna, continue to take out loans.
I mean, hell, I don't know what happened to it. It was there the last time I looked. The point is, it's really difficult to do comedy about this because that's what these motherfuckers are really saying.
I know. And, with all these trips coming out, who thinks that they're going to be brought home at any point? I mean, they're never going to be coming home anytime soon. And even if they do, and even if that's true, even if they were brought home, say right now at this very minute, they're going to be homeless. They're going to be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Vets who come home from the military are far more likely to be homeless than actually finding a job.
You're looking at scenarios. You have to ask the question, what if they want to come home and there is no military that can afford the military transport to put them on planes home? What if they're going to have to buy their own goddamn air tickets to get home?
It's not just that, Neil. The military doesn't pay them shit. They pay them the wages that makes Michael Vick, killing those dogs, look like a saint, for fuck's sake.
Here is the end game, okay, which I put into the novel Alongside Night, which came out in '79, and I'm putting into the movie which I'm in production on right now. At the point in which soldiers aren't being paid enough to buy groceries for their family, the government stops working. That's the end game.
No, they've already reached that point. First of all, I know about how the government treats the military. They still owe me $15,000 that they won't admit to. Second of all, there was a few years ago a big debate about soldiers' food stamps because it was a big embarrassment that the soldiers qualified for food stamps, and the end result was to, instead of increase soldiers' pay, to simply say, no, if you're a soldier, you can't be on food stamps.
What happens when the food stamps no longer get food for the soldiers? What happens?
Don't anymore, because soldiers can't use them because their directive came down saying, well, we're not going to increase your pay, but we're just going to find other ways to get you food because you're not allowed food stamps because you're a soldier.
At the point when you make a soldier decide between loyalty to his country and loyalty to his family, you have a real problem.
And we already have a real problem.
That's their problem, because the point is that without the military, they lose their point of contact to enforce their endless stupid regulations.
I know. I was in the Air Force for 10 years, and I've seen quite a bit of how they mistreat those who are in uniform.
Well, it is not endlessly elastic.
No, it's not. There's quite a lot they'll put up with because of the current structure of being a volunteer force, but there is a breaking point for even the most die-hard gung-ho.
Well, guys, I want to thank everybody for coming on tonight. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our 2-hour slot, so we're going to have to call it quits. But I'd like to invite all of you back again for a future show, and maybe we can also have one where we talk a little bit about the transitioning vets as well. That's a topic I'd definitely like to get into.
I thought it was a great show tonight, fellas.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely a very good show, guys. This is a great combination of guests, I think.
Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot, everybody. See ya.
See y'all later.